The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar called The Probation Poster Child. Our presenters today are Justin Benjamin, Summer Glenn, and Stephanie Gerst. A recorded version of this webinar will be made available soon to all members, and throughout the webinar we would love to hear from you, so feel free to post your questions throughout the session and we will designate the last 10 minutes to respond to your questions. For those of you just joining us, welcome to today's session, The Probation Poster Child. I will now turn it to Stephanie and Summer to introduce our speaker, Justin.
Thank you, Drillin, and hello, everybody. We are so thrilled to have you here today. My name is Stephanie, and I'm a probation officer for the Coconino County Adult Probation. And I've served here since 2008, holding various positions, which led to my current position as probation officer. It is my distinguished honor to introduce to you today two incredible folks and facilitate this conversation about being effective in helping someone change their life. Summer Glenn has been an adult probation officer since 2005. She currently serves as lead probation officer. She advises and supervises offenders as ordered by the court in order to enforce compliance with court directives. She works to build positive working relationships with offenders. She is both a motivational interviewing instructor and moral recognition therapy facilitator. She currently serves in our pre-sentence division and sends reports to the court so they can determine whether or not an individual is appropriate for probation. Justin is a former inmate of the Texas Department of Corrections, and he later successfully completed probation in Arizona with Summer as his PO. He offered peer support at Northern Arizona Substance Abuse Services for 3 years. He was a mental health technician at the Guidance Center and the Flagstaff Medical Center in Flagstaff. He offered forensic peer support at Hope Lives in Phoenix and Flagstaff. Since 2017, he has served as the Program Project Reentry Specialist for the Arizona Department of Corrections. And he is currently there today. And Justin, what exactly do you want to share with everybody?
Oh, wow, that's kind of a cliffhanger introduction. So just so you know, everyone who's viewing this, we have a live audience here with me. Today I run and facilitate a program for offenders who are, they technically violate their conditions of supervision and they come into my program it's a 21-day program. We use psychoeducation and it's a diversion. A person could get a technical violation and instead of going back to the institution, they send them here. It's an institutional setting. We have barbed wire fence. There are housing areas, cell blocks, and all the locks have been taken out of the housing areas. The barbed wire still is up. But within that institutional setting is a treatment center. And so right now we decided that during this webinar we would include my motivation enhancement residents in the audience. So we have a live studio audience here. I guess where would I begin? I think when sharing my story is that a lot of people want to hear the good stuff right off the bat. You know, you want to catch the fish with the dessert. And to some people, that is it could be the things like the prison or the rape or kidnapping, murder, homelessness, all the muck or the stuff that's really, you know, CNN worthy, like nightly news worthy. But to other people, the good stuff is the restoration and the repairing of relationships and making things whole again. And so I have a story, I believe, that is a story that goes across the spectrum, across the continuum. I got two prison numbers. My Texas number is 10-24-47-9. That one's forever etched in my mind. Got that number whenever I was 19 years old. I caught that charge whenever I was 17. I was completely and utterly baffled at how fast my life changed, just out of a couple of choices. It was 6 months. I went from being your typical high school kid to being in Tarrant County Belknap Jail, which is an old, dark, dingy county jail. My other number is 221791. That's my Arizona number. I got that number while I was in the Coconino County Jail. It was a strange story, and maybe during the question and answer part, we can kind of talk about some of those things. But I think the message that I have to give is a three-part message of restoration. And so first, incarceration. So at the age of 17, getting incarcerated, getting locked up, that was a big deal. But if I circle back to where my incarceration began for me, I think it started in 1984. So my parents were, they were children of the 60s. And one day where my father tells me, hey, bud, we're going to go for a ride. Why don't you jump up in this truck? And so I just, something about it, like the instinct, that old caveman brain was like, nope, it's a bad idea, and he's like, come on, hot rod, come on, get in the truck, let's go, and eventually I got in the truck, and I remember sitting in that truck, and it was just, I'm riding around on the seat and I'm bouncing up and down those old, they have the springs, and we go around, and the next thing I remember, I'm in the front seat of another car in a high-speed chase, and my dad's jumping a curb and pulling into a parking lot, screeching on the brakes. He reaches over and grabs me and throws me under his arm, and he's in a full sprint. And I remember watching the earth just bounce while my head was kind of jiggling, and the officer yelled, stop, get on the ground, right? And my dad set me down, and he looked at me and he said, run home, son. And I was 4 years old. Like, that's not typical, to go through that. And that was pretty traumatic. I think that was the first time I can honestly remember the feelings and the fear related to law enforcement. And the officer came over and he picked me up after they apprehended my father, and he had a hold of me, and he said, it's going to be okay, man. We got him. You're safe. And that's not the message that I was getting. The message that I was getting was, my dad's being held at gunpoint, he's being handcuffed, and you're taking my father away from me. And so there was just spotty, from there. I remember being in the jail. I remember being in the courthouse and them taking my father away to prison. And I remember visiting my father. I remember my brother being born and my father not being there. It was tough, but that was just part of life. Like, I didn't know that was tough when I was a kid. I thought that was just life, And so eventually my dad came home, and I remember when he came home, we went to a restaurant, and he sat down, and once we had sat down, he opened up a Coors Light. You remember those old Coors Lights that had that peel top and they had the big mouth, I remember he opened that up, and it just, that was a symbol of that danger. That was that thing that reminded me, like, man, it's not going to be peachy, and I was just a child then. So I had formed a belief, man. My belief as far as law enforcement was concerned was that they were not there for anything but trouble. And my mom had, she probably set a state record for DWIs, they were called back in the day. So she was often doing a jail stint, and my dad, there was a time one night, I remember, I lived in a motel for about 6 years. My family and I, it was pretty bad. I remember there was times where you thought the cockroach was on the TV, and you'd go over there to get the cockroach, and it wasn't on the TV, it was inside the TV, So there was tough times, and I went through different socioeconomic classes. I had things, and I had absolutely nothing. And I remember there was a time my father gave me a couple dollars. He told me, hey, run across the street to Wendy's and get yourself some cheeseburgers. Don't tell your brother and sister that you got to eat today. You know what I mean? Like, it was rough. And it wasn't uncommon for the cops to come and take away my mom and dad. And so when I thought of law enforcement, I thought of a problem. And at 17, one night I was on a lot of drugs. It was a couple days worth of a bender. I like to smoke sherm. I like to drink hard liquor. and I was out getting high, and I was hitting a lick, you know. I had done a couple small robberies here and there, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to step it up. I'm going to do burglary of a vehicle. I'm going to do strong arm carjacking. And so I ran up on this guy, and I attacked him in the middle of a parking lot and tried to steal his car. Everything went wrong as it should have. And then I fled the scene, and the Arlington Police Department caught up with me in a restaurant, a Subway restaurant. And when they went to apprehend me, I just went into fight mode. And so I started to attack the police officers. I ended up having, that night when I woke up, I was informed that I had 5 counts of aggravated assault on a police officer, 2 counts of robbery with bodily harm, and a couple more assaults on civilian. And so I realized that I wasn't going to be going home that night. You know, I think what I deal with and what I experienced was this strong belief and this strong hatred for law enforcement. And in a moment, I lost, you know, moral and ethical ability to process, and I just did what I reacted, and I now am in a whole different demographic. Now I'm a felon. I'm 17 years old. Everything has changed. And I remember through that process, it was really hard. It was really ugly. It was difficult. I got out after a couple, I think it was like, so that whole number, I ended up doing a couple of months in county jail. My first offer was 12 years. And you can imagine a 17-year-old kid getting offered 12 years, what it did to me. It broke me. And it went from 12 to 8. And then they ended up offering me after a while. I think it was close to a year I was in there in county. They ended up offering me 2 years of state jail or probation, deferred adjudicated probation. I don't know what probation is, right? All I know is it means you can get out, right? And I could have done that time really easily, you know. That time could have been a cakewalk. Instead, I took the paper and I get out, and I was violated in a month, and I was sent back, and I did shock incarceration for 18 months. If you're not familiar with shock incarceration, it's like boot camp, military boot camp. It's a 6-month program. It's literally hell week every week. And I did that for 3 rounds because my parents at that time had left the state. So every time they went to check my address, no one lived there who knew me, you know. So I recycled through that program 3 different times. Eventually they asked me, do you want to go through the program again, or do you want to go to the CRC? I went to the CRC and then realized, why am I going back, right? Why would I leave this place and then give me a opportunity to leave and come? And so I eventually absconded, went through a couple of other things. But the reason that I talk about my past and I talk about that incarceration is because it brought me to a point where I was completely defeated. And I remember when I was sitting in Texas Department of Corrections, it was hot, it was humid, and it was loud. And, you know, I worked hard, I got bigger, I got a lot of tattoos, and, you know, I went down a path. But I remember sitting there and just crying and thinking, like, you know, how is this ever going to be used for good? Like, in what way will this ever be something that betters my life? This is hell, you know? And after a decade of freedom, sobriety, and work, I can honestly say that that point in my life that I thought was the lowest point can be used for something good today, to reach people who've been incarcerated and share hope and inspire change within the Department of Corrections, not just with the inmates and the offenders, but with professionals too. I get to offer training to the entire community corrections staff. Every time we do a cadet academy here in parole, I get to facilitate a training called the Role of the Correctional Professional in Reentry, and I get to share with them my perspective how to be, you know, most effective in delivering care to an inmate or an offender. And then at the end of the process, I get to tell them my story and see, you know, hey, does it change anything? You know, I've got good insight whether or not I was locked up or not. I think that's really amazing. That the beginning of my story it's a very dark, I mean, like, it's kind of summarized. I think I could kind of sum it up in like one easy story. When I got out of jail, I came home.
Unmuted.
I went and got my dad some crack, and we went and smoked it under a bridge. It's a wrap, right? That's a bottom that most people don't have to go through. And coming from that bottom and then coming to a position where I can be in the community and not just, add, but really be impactful in individuals' lives and in the lives and in the system, the life of the system. I think it's a real message of restoration and hope. The next thing I want to talk to you about is about the dream. Whenever I was incarcerated, I think it's kind of like, it's like involuntarily, like subconsciously, we use that ability and that capacity to dream or even believe that we can dream. I came home from TDC. I was 23 years old. I weighed I think I was 198 pounds, maybe like 2% body fat. I could probably run 3 miles in like 15 minutes. Like, I was in shape. And I remember sitting down with my dad there on his bed, and he said, "All right, boy, what are you gonna do now?" And I said, "Dad, I'm gonna go play indoor football." And he laughed me out of the room, man. He told me I needed to get my head out of the clouds. I need to go get a real job. Who do you think you are? And so I listened to him. I didn't pursue it. And for years, there was that big hole of like, what am I doing? What am I going to do? And I continued to drink and party and use drugs and commit crimes. And eventually that's where I ended up getting my ADC number. And then along the way, when I got sober, I met a girl. Her name is Mercedes. And she showed me very simply how to believe in myself and how to have a dream. She helped me to understand that I wasn't a father because the kids lived in my house or because I did or I could pay child support. She taught me that the way that I carried myself every day was what made me, she taught me how to believe that I was worth something. And then she told me I could go get my dream. And one day I came home. I used to play flag football on the weekends with the guys. And I remember I come home and I was all tired. And she's like, why don't you just go play football for a team, And I said, well, I can't. And she said, why not? And I didn't have an answer for her, you know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't know why not, right? And so she helped me, she was the one who kind of encouraged me to go back to college and do these different things. And so eventually I started playing semi-pro football, and that's where I met Stephanie. So Summer and Stephanie, Summer obviously walked me through my path to really understanding and seeing. She was the first person to show me that I could believe in what someone else tells me. I think she introduced that idea that I remember sitting with Summer and saying, I can't do this. There's no way I'm gonna be able to do 4 years of this. And her telling me that we could do it together. And that was really radical. And so anyhow, when I was playing football out here in Arizona, I met Stephanie. I had no idea Stephanie was even worked for probation or involved with law enforcement. And but what's cool is that because she does and she has that role, it just reinforces my belief that law enforcement is here to make this a better community. It's here to make the city or the county or the state safer and better. And I didn't hold that belief for a very long time, but slowly, as I sobered up and as I started to kind of get my feet under me, I started to meet these people and come to find out they're law enforcement or they're, COs or, different things like that. And so the football was really powerful for me. My children got to see me play, all of them. Can we look at the next slide? And then, so my children got to see me play football. This is my family. This is a part of my family. I have a 20-year-old daughter who's not in this picture. I'm going to be a grandfather this year in a couple of months. It's going to be pretty cool. But today I have a different life. And when I was playing semi, I got recruited by one of the high schools to come be a coach. And through that process, they turned me down. They told me I couldn't be the coach. And it was really defeating and it was devastating. And but I didn't give up on any of my dreams. Just like with this incarceration, like as I went through this process over the last 12 years, many times that there was no way you were going to work in Department of Corrections as a volunteer, let alone an employee. There was always a no in front of everything that I was pursuing, but I never gave up. And it's because I had strong people in my life like Summer and Stephanie and Mercedes and just other people. Like the role of the correctional professional is so profound and powerful, because whenever those people turned towards me and told me you can and you must in order to be free, I felt like I was able and empowered to become equipped to do what I needed to do. So anyhow, today I coach a football team. I coach my daughter. I coach her school's football team. And I think that's just another example of restoration. I think it's another message that says, you know, anything is possible. Whatever you believe in and what you put your value in and you push forward towards, it'll get honored. Can we look at the next slide? So having been down an ugly road and been incarcerated for a long period of time, not really having a whole lot of tools, it was really difficult for me to come out of that adversity. And I'd say one of the biggest things that I had was a belief of shame. I remember the first time Summer showed me this mugshot. I said, she asked me about this mugshot, and I said, I don't know. And she's like, well, do you remember why you were beat up? And I was like, I don't know. It could have been a fight with my dad or a guy on the street or whatever. I'm pretty sure, judging by the red neck, that was my dad trying to choke some sense into me. But can I see the next slide? But eventually, I was able to use the adversity and see that adversity as an opportunity. And in my class, we talk a lot about what are we using? What's our driver? Is it internal? Is it external? And a person who uses an internal driver is able to look at adversity and see it and get excited about it. And because of that, those outside people that influenced me and told me that I could and told me there was others like me and told me that it was possible, I started to believe that if I walked forward and I put one foot in front of the other, that my outcome would change. And then I started to see the result, and things started to get better. Can you see the next slide? So one of the biggest, so that'll take you back. That's me. I was probably say 163 pounds. You know, I'm not too critical of my size, right? 163. I was high, for sure. To look that calm and reserved right there was definitely under the influence of drugs. But yeah, that was my booking or my intake at in 2007. So can I see the next slide? And there's Summer, my amazing guide to getting things on track. And that's pretty much what she looked like when I met her. She had a big cheesy grin and was like, we can do it. Psych. Next slide. All right, so here I am. I wanted to make sure we use the slides, guys. So there's Stephanie there in the Hitman t-shirt, and then there's me next to the coach there on the side. They called me the human hammer. So my knucklehead wasn't just like when I was breaking rules, it was when I was trying to run people over too. So next slide, please. So this is the most powerful part of my life. It's the most, it's the freshest thing in my life, and it's about relationships. So there's a picture here on the right of me above another picture of a person below. And so when I was in second grade, I found out that I had a brother who was adopted at birth. And man, it was weird growing up, knowing that there was another sibling out there running around, you know, and I thought about him a lot, and I often stared off into nowhere with my drugs and my alcohol and just tried to feel connection with that person because they weren't suffering through what I was suffering through, and I just daydream about him and what could it possibly be like for him. And today, just this year, I'd say about 2 months ago, I met him for the very first time. there was a time where I thought, I mean, it's just so crazy. There's a long story there, but the reason that I bring that into my message today is because of the restoration. So I went and saw him over the weekend. I did an overnight trip this weekend. I drove down straight to Vegas, hung out with him. He's a Cirque du Soleil performer at the Mirage. He's one of the longest cast members. He was the original cast member. It was so beautiful. There's that song, Blackbird Singing in the Dead of Night. He literally falls down from the ceiling, and it was just amazing. Like, I was just brought to emotions that I'd never experienced, of joy and just fulfillment and gratitude for the pain and the things that I'd gone through. Like, even just not having him for those 36 years, but then having him now and realizing that anything is possible and that restoration actually can happen to the things that are seemingly unbelievable. I hope that's what you can hear in the message that I have. And I use these examples of incarceration and dreaming and relationships because these are the powerful tools that we have to engage the community of inmate or offender in change. And when we become aware and we do everything within range and reason to utilize those in an effective way, you get an outcome like mine. And it doesn't just change my life, it's changed the lives of all 5 of my children, my wife, my family. It's a very referent impact. And if you could see the room, these men also, they get to have a little referent change as well, because I get to share my message of hope and the knowledge and the wisdom that I've gained on this path to betterment.
And I think that's why hosting this webinar is so important to all of us. And Justin, I just want to thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your story in Miami and now on this webinar across the country. As probation officers, we want to learn what works, what helped you get through probation whenever you met Summer. And so now we want to switch gears and kind of turn this into a question and answer between you and Summer. But I want to start with Summer. And
Do you want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
So we don't, oh yeah, okay.
So Summer, I want to switch gears and ask you,
Okay.
do you remember the first time you met Justin?
Oh yeah, I totally do. Well, it was the picture earlier with him high with the clipboard and his name. That was literally the moment we met face to face. But I remember reading his pre-sentence report before he came in and literally thinking to myself, like, this kid's not gonna make it. There was no inclination whatsoever in that report that he was ready to change. And like, he was still engaged in drug use. He was still in drinking. He was still committing felonies. I knew that he had this really troubled past and that a lot of these behaviors appeared to be learned behaviors. And he didn't show any inclination or any motivation at all nothing for me to grab onto to say, okay, this is which way we need to move forward to get him engaged in thinking about change. When I first met him, I called him back into the office. We took the photograph. He was high, obviously. And the first thing he said to me was, "Your name's Summer Glenn?" And I said, "Yeah, that's my name." And he goes, "Are you related to, Sergeant Glenn in the jail?" And that's my husband. And I said, "Maybe." I think I said maybe. And he goes, "Well, if that's the case, I'm not messing with you." And I'm like, okay, whatever. And we went back into my office and reviewed our conditions of probation. And his body language just told me that he didn't want to be there. He sat in the chair all slouched back, irritated. Like, I was definitely a pit stop in the day that he just had to make so he could move on with his day. And just to tell me anything that he needed to tell me so he could get out of there. And I could tell he didn't want to be there at all, just wanted to leave, completely disengaged. This was not the first or second or maybe third time he'd even come to probation. Like, I feel like he came under the guise of like, let's see how many days I can buy myself before I go back to jail.
And so, Justin, what was your first impression of Summer?
Well, I thought Summer was gonna be an easy pushover. I mean, she's young. Like, I thought, oh, this will be a piece of cake. I'll just, it's gonna be easy. You know, like she's gonna be easy to manipulate, and she's too young to know what she's doing.
And so when you finally made it to us, what about Summer's supervision worked for you? Like, what was the difference for you this time around?
Well, so I guess some measurables that I could indicate are like, so she knew the names of my children. That's pretty big. Like, she would ask me, instead of like, you know, I see that you didn't make it in on time to pee and you had that blah, blah. She would say like, so how are things going with Anthony? What's going on with Justice? How have you talked to Justice in a while? You know, she wanted to know about me. She wanted to know about the parts that were supposed to be growing, she didn't tell me about what not to do constantly. I knew what not to do. I was my worst critic, you know. She was there to talk to me about what I can do. That was a lot different from anything I'd ever experienced.
Well, and what were your expectations of Justin?
Well, initially, compliance with the court orders is obviously a built-in expectation. I mean, that's not a negotiable. But I learned that if I came into this professional partnership thinking that I had the power, it wasn't going to work. I expected him to work harder than I was going to work for him. And I wasn't going to do probation for him. And if he didn't want to do it, I wasn't going to make him. But I came into it asking and expecting him to be vulnerable a little bit and to let me into his life a little bit and share when and what he was willing to do to change and if he wanted to change. And I have to tell you, I also expected him to lie. And that's part of the deal. And he did plenty of times, I'm sure. Even to this day, there's things I'm sure I don't know, and it doesn't matter. But because all he did was damage to himself with that. That wasn't personal. That wasn't anything that I could take personal or take home with me and be angry about. This was Justin's story, and he was driving the bus.
So how did you balance that level of accountability and still believe or trust him?
So the balance was built in, and it was nothing that I was ever worried about. Conditions are the rules, and they're not negotiable. You know, court sets forth all these conditions of things that they have expectations that they complete. And so those things were always on the forefront of what we were trying to accomplish. Again, ultimately, he has all the decision-making power, and he knew that it was my job to deliver the sanctions when it warranted. He knew that was my job. I knew that was my job. We could sit and have a vulnerable conversation and connect as I'm standing in his living room with a probation banner across my bulletproof vest and a gun on my right side. And we had built a rapport and a camaraderie and a working relationship outside of those things. Again, he knew I had a job to do. I knew I had a job to do. But those things can exist together. You can take a vested interest in another person and care about the human and offer support to the human while still doing your job. It's not an either or situation.
Justin, did you ever try to get away with anything?
Oh, yeah. No, I did. I got away with stuff but that's the thing about trying to get away with something and then like getting away with it. It's like, it's terrible to do, you know, especially whenever, like what I was thinking while she was talking was that it wasn't a matter of if things were going to get better. It was a matter of if I could logistically pull it off. You know, she wasn't trying to keep me from becoming a better person. She was just trying to help me work through logistics. But yeah, I got in my own way, like more. Yeah, no, I screwed up a lot. I did.
So Summer, was there anything in particular that you did to hold the line? Was there any particular
So I remember like very quickly after Justin came to probation, he had called and left me a voicemail over the weekend or something and said, hey, he admitted to drinking. And at the time he was on a high risk caseload, and there was a pretty zero tolerance policy to drug and alcohol use at the time, and he was on for felony DUI. And so I called him and I said, you need to get in here now. And I appreciate your honesty, but get in here now. And he came, and I'll let him like kind of tell you what his thoughts were at the time.
Yeah, that was a bit, it was, I mean, I like the way you're all calm about, yeah, get in here now. It wasn't like that. There was some vulgarity. And I mean, but it was serious, you know. I remember the chief, or was it not the chief, but the supervisor, she's, you tell him to turn it right now, you know. And so I knew, like, all right, I got to get down there. So I called my family and I was like, hey, I love you guys, you know.
I'm going back to
prison, you know. And I was really scared, you know. I was riding down there with my dad and I was just telling him basically, like, you know, just please, I know how hard it is, but you just try to put some money on my books and tell mom to write, you know. And I knew that was it. Like, I had already written my return ticket to DOC. And when I got in there, they could have been metaphorical handcuffs, but I'm pretty sure that there was some serious cuffs got thrown on me there. I was utterly hopeless. You know, I had been, and just before I went on paper, I was completely hopeless, but I was also completely willing. And in that moment, again, I was sitting there in that office, and I remember Summer said, was it worth it? You know, and the answer, I mean, I know it's a rhetorical question, but it's never worth it. But there's nothing I can do about it. I have a disease. And for some reason, I continue to pick up when I don't know what else to do. And, you know, I'm sitting there facing 4 years as far as I was concerned, and I was defeated. And whenever you said, or you can try a program, that was the first time I ever heard or, you know, or we'll go do this if you want to try it. And I was like, that's all I've been waiting for, you know. But that was a big moment for me. That was a pivotal moment, because instead of being dunked on my head, I was shown grace, undeserved, you know. And then I got equipped with people who taught me how to receive that, because I didn't even know how to receive that. I hadn't any repetition at it, so I needed to be around people in the community that could show me how to take grace and how to take opportunity and not squander it.
So I think you answered a part of this question, but I just want to ask you to clarify. How did you get to the point where you personally make the decision to take probation seriously?
Well, that was it. It was that moment whenever I knew that this was, you know, the point of no return. And I did what I could. Like, I wasn't flawless at it. And I think that was the thing, is she told me that I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to do my best, and I needed to let her help me. And so I believed her. And I don't know why. It could have been because it was a small town and I knew her husband and from the jail, because I didn't know him, but like, it could have been a lot of things. But whatever it was, is I believed her when she said, if you do what you can, I'll do what I can. Mm-hmm. And so I started trying. And whenever things were hard, instead of trying to keep it secret and isolate it, you know, I told her, like, man, I can't do this. I need your help. It's really hard. I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And usually the answer was no, figure it out on your own. But if it had something to do with my conditions of supervision, then there was always that discretion that could be there, you know?
I think too that, you know, a lot of times when we were trying to map something out for you in your life, you'd be like, you know, like when I called you in about the drinking and I gave you that choice of, do you want to go to jail right now? Or are you going to make that 6-month commitment to sober living right now? Because if you make that commitment, you're going tonight. And I remember you looking at me and you saying, I can't do 6 months. And I said, I'm not I'm asking you to commit to 6 months. I'm not asking you to know how to get there. I just want, how about we get to tomorrow? And we operated on that basis every day. Okay, so how are we going to get to tomorrow? What about next Thursday? Can you get to next Thursday? What are some things that we can do together to get you to just the next UA sober? And it's just
and I think like today,
the whole animal.
Yeah, and that's what you've given me over time, just as a professional, is that. So that thing I saw first, I think, in you wasn't that you were young and naive and an easy pushover. You believed in humanity, and that you had an ability to care. And then instead of through time, instead of manipulating that, I was able to receive that care through guidance, right? Through measurables, like you helping me navigate to the next week, or make it to the next Christmas, or make it to the first interaction with my children, or whatever. So, yeah.
And so, Justin, are you still sober today, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so this is a very, I have to be very specific here. I don't want to cause any confusion. I have not relapsed recently. I did recently talk to Summer about it. I initially got sober in 2007. And I was doing great. It was 2000, I want to say New Year's Day of 2015. I had justified and rationalized having another drink, so I drank champagne. I wanted to try to figure out, my takeaway from my relapse was all I really wanted was permission, to try to, if I wanted to, I could go have a drink, I really wanted to earn that permission somehow. And I felt like at that moment I had that permission. It's a whole nother talk, but I did eventually pick up and try to drink like a normal person, realizing that is the actual epidemic of alcoholism, is wishing that I could drink like a normal person, with impunity. And it picked up a chip in September of 2016. So I have a new sobriety. My initial date was 9/27/07, and my new date is 9/29/16. And I don't think there's a coincidence in the closeness of those dates. I think it's probably just another eye opener for me that I'm not supposed to play with fire. But yeah, today, and it was really hard for me to share that part of my story, my experience. Navigating through that was really difficult, and thinking that I'd be perceived as weak or unnecessary, or how could someone who relapsed be able to help others? But it's true that I can. I can lower myself again and admit where I've been at fault, and I can see where my weaknesses are. And it's hard in our culture, in our sector, to show weakness. As criminal justice professionals or corrections professionals, you never want to show weakness in any way. But for me to do that, I feel like it's just another opportunity for me to be a pioneer and show that it's safe to be fallible, as long as we can continue to try to get better every day.
Thank you, Justin. And I know that every single time we do this presentation, you have to be vulnerable, and this presentation looks different every single time we do it. And I'm just cannot express how privileged and thankful I am to be able to do this, and also have an amazing field training officer. When I became a probation officer, Summer was my field training officer, and I hope I've still learned so much, but I hope that I live up to her reputation and how incredible she has been. So do you want to just go ahead and wrap us up?
Thank you,
Summer.
Sure. Thank you for that, by the way. That's sweet.
Of course.
Okay, so basically, I don't know, I'm assuming our audience is mostly some sort of probation and parole personnel out there. So I don't know if you all kind of feel the same as I do, but this career that we have chosen, it's not for the weary. What we do is incredibly hard work, and quite frankly, we are surrounded by trauma and tragedy and dysfunction and self-destruction all day long, every day. But I want to ask you all the same question that I ask all of my clients the very first time I meet them. And I want you to think about your answer. Do you view probation or parole as a resource or as a consequence? Because your perception of what you do every day matters. I believe that we choose to get up every day and we choose to keep showing up every day because somewhere inside of us, we want to make a difference and be a beacon of light for someone else because we have that ability. We believe that people can change and we want to help people learn how to stop suffering and live a better life. We know that we can make a difference, but a lot of time it just feels overwhelming. But it all starts with your own mindset. So this leads me to ask you, if you knew with absolute certainty that you would make a difference in one person's life and you could be a piece of someone's change story, just like I've been, and would your sacrifices be worth it? And would you do it? So if you knew ahead of time that today was that day, would you embrace this mindset shift right now and do something different? Because I'm going to tell you, today is that day. It's that day every day. So I stand here encouraging all of you and challenging you to pause every single day and tell yourself today is going to be that day. And make an effort to show up for someone. Take a vested interest in another human being and walk their journey with them. Empower someone and believe in them when they don't believe in themselves. Treat somebody with dignity and ask about their families and what matters to them and not necessarily just what matters to you. Stop checking the boxes at your desk on office day and take a few minutes to connect with someone. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them how their families are. Be there and just listen. Tell them that you believe in them. And remember, sobriety and compliance with court orders might be a probation requirement, but it's not a person's identity. You can have all of those non-negotiables right alongside of dignity because they can coexist. So 12 years ago, I saw Justin on paper, and my first impression of him was completely wrong. My beliefs of him quickly changed when I saw him sitting in the chair in my office in tears, and he was looking at the floor and he had his head in his hands and he was full of nothing but desperation. And that was the day where he got the choice. It occurred to me in those moments that he was a broken human being. And this is not the path that he wanted for his life. Nobody chooses this. Nobody wants this. And I needed to show him that he was worth changing. So I changed my perspective, and I saw him as a man and a son and a father and a human being and a member of my community who was suffering and who tormented himself with his own choices more than anyone or anything else could have ever tormented him. I saw his humanity beneath the surface of his behavior, and I wanted him to see that too. I also saw things in him that he didn't believe existed, and so I chose to bring them out and make him bigger and put them right in front of him to remind him of the things that he had. So for example, obviously he has tremendous leadership experience. You all got to see that today. And so I offered him opportunities in the community to shine and to mentor others. And by speaking at community DUI impact panels, he eventually went on to be a person that went into our jail here in Coconino County before anybody ever went into the jail with a felony record, and did meetings and was a support person and a volunteer. He's obviously ran with those leadership and public speaking gifts, and he's using that as a platform now in his daily work to give back and to teach others to find their own self-worth and become free just like he has. So for Justin to take all of those opportunities and now put them into play and come from a place of service, that's where he operates from today. He wants to take all of those things and give them to other people and make that difference for his community and to be a support person for others. Now that right there is more than I think anyone could ever ask for when it comes for change. Not only has he made his own life better, but now he's committed to doing that for others, which is huge. So when Justin and probation, when his probation was over with, he wasn't cured because there was nothing wrong with him to begin with. He was ready to fly on his own and ready to go live life without probation. But despite being off paper, he has chosen to stay connected with me. He called me when he was getting married, and my husband and I, we showed up. We went to his wedding. And he called me when his mother passed away, and I showed up and I was a support person for him. He called me when he moved to Phoenix and was reaching for this new job that he did not believe he deserved. And I praised him and I reminded him that anything is possible and to go for it. And he did. And he sits there today and he got that job. He calls and he shared the birth of his youngest 3 children and his wife's successes with me, and I answer. He called when, he gets that new job, and I celebrated big with him. He invited me to come see his program there at the prison and wanted to introduce me to the men in the program at the time, and I showed up and I came. He shamefully told me about his relapse years ago, and I reminded him that he can stand up and keep going, and I celebrated his vulnerability and told him it's okay, that he doesn't need to be, afraid to tell me those things, because this is his story and his walk, and I'll be here and show up for him as long as he needs me to do that. So again, he calls me to this day and just even thanks me for being here. It's been 12 years since we met, and he still just will call randomly and say, I was thinking about the fact that you're still here. Thank you. I had a bad day, or let me tell you about the amazing thing that happened today. And that is just such a blessing for me.
Yeah, I'm glad you were there this morning when I needed you.
Yeah, it happened. It happens. I have to say that I am so proud that all of the things that you have chosen to do for you. And I love getting to watch it, and I'll forever be here, and I will continue to show up for you for as long as you invite me to do so. And not only because you deserve it and because that's who I am, but because you tell people that we're changing the world together.
We are right now.
We are.
There's men in this room that have probably never heard a PO talk to anyone like that. And so we're literally, that's what we do. We change the world together. And
I believe that this is what we all want to do. But I feel like a lot of us criminal justice practitioners don't know how to find that balance. We don't know how to care and do our jobs at the same time, because it's scary and it's vulnerable. All that vulnerability that you shared today, because we're human, we have the same fears too. And culture change is hard. It takes time. And I mean, my department is phenomenal. I'm going to say that because I love and live this place. But we've been working on this culture change for 11 years. Significant, hardcore work for 11 diligent years. And we've arrived. This is how we do business as a collective. We have some incredibly gifted human beings that come and sacrifice their heart and soul every single day. And this is how we do business. So it can be done, but it's scary. So I promise you that all these probation and parole officers that you all in that room deal with, we're human beings too. So sometimes we need a little grace, like y'all need some grace, right? So I just want to thank you all that have tuned in today for showing up for us today, because our story is something that is near and dear and special to me. And to be able to share that with all of you from across the country, wherever you're from, thank you so much for taking your time and being with us today.
Thank you. And I know that the APPA wanted us to spend a couple of minutes, maybe 10 minutes. If there are any questions out there, Drillin, did you want to invite that?
do we have our last slide still? Did we lose our last slide or?
Oh, so Drillin, there is a video that Justin prepared. It's super quick. We'd love to show that if we can.
Okay, let's do that now.
Okay. And
You just wait. If you push play, it'll eventually come on.
There we go.
There we go. Oh man.
the music.
That's okay. It's still super cool.
We'll work the kinks out someday.
We will. We'll get this down pat sometime.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, Drillin, did you want to invite anybody in case they have a few questions?
Yes, we do have a question here, and the first one is for Justin. How do you balance yourself today, both as a man in recovery and a professional in the field? What suggestions do you have for others that are two-hatters?
So it's very important that you have, I mean, some people call him a sponsor. I call him Yoda, or just your tree or well of knowledge. I mean, I think the growth happens naturally, that as you continue to move professionally, you get surrounded by leaders in your life who can help point out and give you those early identifiers that, hey, where's your self-care? I definitely practice very basic fundamentals, daily meditation, participation in 12-step community for me is what's key. I'm still connected to the roots. Like, I'm never going to forget where solid ground is, because when I do, I get reminded. Like, you know, I shared with you guys in 2015. But yeah, staying connected to my roots, listening to the people around me who've been there to support me on my way to, you know, this sustainable condition, and then practicing the basics. Like, that's what I teach my guys in my program, is we got to do the unsexy things consistently over time. Like, nobody wants to floss their teeth and make their bed every day, but when you do that, you get an amazing net gain out of it in life. And so doing the little stuff is a big worth changer for me.
I think you have a lot of self-awareness too, and I think that that's something that you have worked on. And so you have this ability to, at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, like, rerun the tape of what happened and where did I excel today and where could I have done better today.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you've even called me at times going, hey, this happened today. Like, how do I process this? What does this all mean? And there are times where it's like, yeah, that self-awareness is huge.
Yeah. And that's, I teach my guys today, you know, we have morning mindset, we have evening journal, and like, when we consistently practice those basic disciplines, that's, like you said, that's the maturation. That's the part of the person who starts to look in and say, okay, what is it that I'm doing or not doing? Like, one of my big mantras is that you never really have an opponent. The only adversity you may face is your ability to be prepared. Either you're prepared or you're unprepared. You're going to face someone. It's like you think of a race car driver. The moment he starts trying to race the car next to him, he stops driving his car. And so really understanding, what is it can I do today so that I'm prepared and I'm equipped?
I think that stands for those that don't wear two hats as well. You know, you playing in both worlds sometimes, and
On the dual, like, having the dual roles is like not being afraid to be judged, because you will be, like, you're going to be seen that way because you see yourself that way. If you're a person who's been on one side of the coin and is now considered, you know, both sides, like, you see yourself differently. So guess what? The world sees you differently. I think it's important to understand that most of the resistance that we get outside is usually something like internally that we're not coming to grips with.
the stories we make up about ourselves.
Yeah.
Are there any questions in that room with you, Justin?
Well, I have somebody, a special guest who walked in. Come here.
No,
So this woman is amazing. This is the deputy warden, and yeah, so I just wanted her to say hi. She's the one who really believes in me and she gets behind me whenever feels like there's no one there.
I use my size 9 when I need to. A little pushy. A little pressure.
Anyway, yeah. Do you guys have any
Proud of them.
questions or anything you want to? I got a mic. I can hand it to you. No? Everyone's smiling real big.
They're like, no.
I do have a question here asking if they can reach out to you regarding this presentation. And I see that you do have the emails here. So if anybody, you can write those down with your permission. Are they okay to contact you
Is that correct information, Justin?
on that last
Yes.
slide there? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, good.
that's good. Yep.
AZADC or AZDOC?
It's AZADC. I know.
Okay.
We changed our mind.
It's brand new.
Cool.
All right. Justin, Stephanie, and Glenn, thank you very much for your time today and for sharing the amazing story. We hope that our listeners had a great experience here. And we will make this available to all of our members once we get it downloaded here on our end. And it will be available with the rest of our resources on APP Connect. Again, thank you again for making time today for this amazing presentation. And we hope to stay in contact. Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Thank you, and thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.